inshallah, today we are going to be talking about divorce before and after. And because this is such a big and wide subject, I may not necessarily address your concerns or your questions in the presentation, but hopefully in the question and answer period, you can ask, your specific questions, inshallah, bismillah. So let's begin. These are the agenda items I have for you today, inshallah. We're going to begin by cultural messages and then talk about the divorce from Sharia perspective. We're going to focus on resolving conflict and the types of divorce, and then move into research within the American Muslim community about divorce, and then talk about the impact of divorce. And then we're going to spend some time talking about the question when someone is married and wondering, do I divorce or do I stay married? And the last thing for today, we are going to talk about the how to minimize the impact of divorce on the family. So let's begin by talking about some of the cultural messages in our community that are associated with divorce. So let me hear from you. What do you think people associate with divorce in our community? What is it? Something bad? Yes. Shame? Yes. What else? What is it? Yes, there is financial hardship. Mm-hmm. Right. What else? There's way more. So a woman is perceived as being broken. What? Okay, so something is wrong with the woman if she is divorced. Okay, so a broken woman, something is wrong with her if she's divorced. Mm-hmm. No, and anything associated with divorce, any message. But what is it? You're asking, what am I asking for?
Yeah, what's the cause or the effect?
Anything that is with how we as a community perceive divorce. When we talk about divorce in our community, how do we talk about it? That's kind of like what I'm, asking for here. Did I clarify the question? Yeah, okay. What is it? So the impact on children, so what do usually people say about children when there is a divorce? What do people say usually? Huh?
There is an idea that the girls will not be able to get married because their parents got divorced.
Thank you. That's such a big aspect of the cultural messages, right? Okay, girls will not be married, okay, if her parents are divorced, right? That's actually there. Just to give you an idea, I have a client who's actually a non-Muslim, but she's Indian, like Indian from Asia, not Native American Indian. And she is miserable in her marriage, okay? But she's not seeking divorce, and she's telling me, I will not divorce my husband until my daughter is married. Because, if I divorce her father before she's married, the groom's family are going to frown on us, They're not going to actually, think highly of us. And she's a non-Muslim. Yeah. Okay, what other cultural messages are associated with divorce? The children are going to suffer. Thank you, yes, that's huge. Mm-hmm. What else? You can't get remarried. And this is for women or for men? For a woman, yes. A woman cannot get remarried, sorry. Okay, just not to be stuck on this, but this is some of the ideas or some of the cultural messages that we have associated with divorce within, our community. So moving on, this is for those of you who watched Downton Abbey in season 5. Lord, what's his name? Cinderby, I cannot pronounce his name. Atticus' father, what did he say? And because there was an issue with his son marrying Rose if her parents were divorced. Okay? And so he says, well, I'm clearly old-fashioned, but to me, divorce signifies weakness, degradation, scandals, and failure. This is one thing we didn't add here. This is actually in our community too. We consider if somebody is divorced that they have failed. Right? Yes? So I'm going to add that to here. Okay. Moving on. The picture isn't very clear, but this is my father, may Allah bless him, holding my eldest son, Omar. Omar was a few months old in this picture. Omar right now is 28 years old, alhamdulillah. Fadl min Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do I want to share with you what my okay, so let's think, roll back to like 30 years ago, and I am just in the process of getting married, and I'm going to get married very soon. So I've been engaged for maybe a month, 6 weeks, and I'm going to get married in another maybe 2 weeks. And my father, may Allah bless him, he looks at me and he sees me being very anxious and very stressed. And so he looks at me and he asked me, and he's like, oh, Nuha, what's wrong with you? I mean, what's going on? And I say, well, Dad, I have no idea if this is, going to work or not. We did our part. It's not like we went into this marriage without doing, our part in terms of like assessing if there is compatibility, checking into the family, checking into him. We did our part. But still I was worried. So I told him, I'm worried. I mean, what if, I get married to him and then, things don't work out? And he said, Habibti, there's no need for you to worry, because if things don't work out, you can divorce him. And I will be there for you. And I will never forget that from my father. Because as a woman, I needed to know that my family has my back. That my family is actually going to support me and will have no problem with me if I actually had to divorce my husband. That was very significant for me. It was one of those special moments that I had with my father. May Allah bless him. I want you to compare this to stories I hear in my office of women who come into my office and they have an abusive relationship with their husband. And the woman tells me, she goes to her family and she tells them, my husband is abusing me. And she says, he's doing this and he's doing that and so on. And what does the family tell her? You have to go back. There is no place for you to come back to us. You have to go back. Or I want you to compare what my father did to some of our cultural norms, okay, where it's expected that if a woman leaves the house and goes to her husband's house, she will not leave her husband's house except to go to the grave. This is real people, okay? Within the Arab culture, we have some Arab communities that believe that, and in the Indo-Pakistani cultures, we have this. Those are the ones I know. I don't know if there are other also ethnic groups that have that. But compare and be aware of what messages is the family sending, to the children about divorce. Okay, so let's move on to what the Sharia says, with regards to this issue. One of the main goals of Sharia is to protect the family and to cherish the family for many reasons. And me, as a therapist, I see the impact of the family on the lives of my clients all the time. If my clients come from a a very supportive, nurturing family that also had limits. So I'm not talking about spoiling your children. I'm talking about a family that was nurturing, but at the same time established, boundaries and limits. So the individuals, they actually live with a good sense of self. So even when these clients actually have problems, they are able to handle the problems much better, way better than anyone who comes from a family that did not provide that nurture and that support and that safety and security to the children. So Islam cares a lot about the family for a very good reason. In Islam also, we have ways to deal with disagreements and tension, and we're going to go into that in a minute. And of course, you all are aware of the very common hadith, which says the most hated halal to Allah is talaq. Okay? So it is halal, no question about that, but there are limits on the permissibility of divorce within our Sharia. So when things are not working out between the husband and wife, this is an ayah in the Quran. If you fear a breach between them, meaning the husband and the wife, appoint 2 arbitrators, one from his family and one from her family. If they both, and I want to emphasize this word, if they both wish for reconciliation, so the reconciliation or the wish for reconciliation has to come from both parties. What happens if both want to reconcile? Allah will bless their efforts with success. In Arabic, the statement is, إِن يُرِيدَا إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقُ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا. That if both of them, it's very important for you to recognize, it's not talking about one of them. It's talking about both of them wanting to reconcile. And Allah uses the word يُوَفِّق, tawfiq. And tawfiq is basically to crown the efforts of someone with success that only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not through your effort, it's through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what was the seed for that tawfiq in this particular situation? That they both had the intention, the good intention to reconcile. This is very important. Extremely important to keep that in mind, because sometimes we get couples where one of them wants to reconcile, the other one doesn't want to reconcile. Yeah. And another ayah talking about what to do when where is tension. This particular ayah was revealed when the mother of the believer, Sauda bint Zama, she was one of the Prophet's wives. She was an older lady. So at some point, she noticed that the Prophet ﷺ was not really enjoying spending time with her as much as he's enjoying spending time with the rest of his wives. And she was scared that he's actually going to divorce her. So she approached him, and she made an agreement with him that, O Prophet of Allah, how about if I give my night and my day to Aisha radiallahu anha? Just so that she stays married to him. That's an agreement. That is something that they both agreed upon. It worked for Sauda, and it worked for the Prophet ﷺ. So what does the ayah say? If a wife fears ill treatment or desertion, of course she wasn't worried about the Prophet treating her ill or treating her badly, but she was scared that he might be thinking of divorcing her. On her husband's part, there is no blame on them if they arrange an amicable settlement between themselves, and such settlement is best. So within our faith, there are many invitations, if you will, to work things out, and not in one specific way. We can work things out as long as it's working for both parties. So now let's talk about divorce. One of the main goals of Sharia is la darara wa la dirar, which basically loosely translates into no harm to be done to oneself and others. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had divorce or made divorce permissible in our faith. Why? Because it's an extremely critical, important way out Okay, when there is something that is harmful for the husband or harmful for the wife. So you're not stuck in a harmful situation that doesn't work for you. You have a way out. But where was the limit? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, or the hadith said, that that is the most hated halal. It is halal, but it is the most hated halal to us. So when you go and embark on the journey of divorce, you have to do it with open eyes, with clarity, knowing you know what you're going into. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about the types of divorce in Islam. This is something that I recently actually kind of like came to know, which is, and I'm going to explain this in a minute. Divorce in Islam can be said to be a no-fault divorce. And what do we mean by that? Anyone know what it means, the no-fault divorce? Anyone? No? Okay, so I want you to understand that within the Western culture, okay, and this is most probably based originally on some ideas from Christianity. I don't know exactly what, but the root there is in Christianity. I don't know how it is in Judaism. I only know it's there in Christianity. And what does it say? It basically says that you cannot divorce your husband unless you can prove that your spouse has done something wrong. Okay? So the fault-based divorce is basically that you come to the court and you say, I am seeking divorce because, for example, my husband cheated on me. Or, for example, my husband or my wife, had an affair. Or my husband, is causing me mental cruelty. Okay? In Islam, you don't need to do that. There is no need for you to say, I want to divorce this person because this person has done some grievous, something to me. You don't need to do that. And compare the following. So Islam, how long has Islam been around? For how long? How much? 1400 years plus. Okay? Do you know in the US, the first state to establish the no-fault divorce was, any guesses? Of course, it has to be liberal California. So it was California, but what year? When do you think California established that someone can go to the court and ask for divorce without proving that the spouse is at fault? When do you think that was? Just give me guesses. 1960? Who was saying it? 1969. 1969. Okay? And the first state was California. The last state to establish the unilateral no-fault divorce was New York, and this was in 2010. Reflect on that, people. Let me give you examples of what people did before the no-fault divorce was actually established, okay? So in California, there were two grounds for divorce, okay? You either had to prove that the other spouse actually was cheating on you, or you are going to prove cruelty of some kind. So it could be physical abuse, mental abuse, and so on. So in California, a lot of times, in order to get the divorce, the woman would go to court and would actually, say that the husband was mentally cruel to her. And so you had a lot of cases where the woman is actually, under oath. She's crying and sobbing and just describing all the situations when her husband, cursed her or hit her or, did all that stuff for her. So that's in California before 1969. New York, they don't have grounds for cruelty in New York, but they had grounds for cheating and infidelity. So what did they do before, they allowed for the no-fault divorce? The lawyers would tell the woman, you're going to go home at, for example, 11 p.m. And we would agree with this mistress okay, which is usually an actress, okay, that she would be home at the same time at 11 p.m. So you're going to go home and catch your husband in the act with the mister, of course, just pretending. And then we're going to go to court, and you are going to accuse your husband of infidelity. And your husband is going to agree that he actually cheated on you. And that's how they got divorced. Until the no-fault, law was passed. Now, why do you think this is significant? Why do you think I'm wasting time sharing this stuff with you and telling you that Islam, from the beginning, there was no question about the need to actually prove that the spouse was at fault? Why do you think this is significant? So Islam gives us many answers to many things, and our rights have been established. Absolutely. Lovely. Yes. What else? To also protect the integrity of characters of people. You don't have to go and lie and accuse people of cheating when they didn't cheat just to get out of the marriage. Absolutely. What else also? What do you think? Yes. Exactly. It's creating a lot of dysfunction, more than there is need to. Right. Anything else? Yes. You're protecting the reputation of the peoples involved. Yes. As you're saying this, I was sharing the information I shared with you with my girls. And I'm telling them, the stories about the cruelty and infidelity and so on. And then I think one of them went like, I wouldn't want to do cruelty over infidelity. I think I would choose to do the infidelity over the cruelty. But the point is, somebody is being, harmed. The reputation is being harmed. I think also something to keep in mind. When Islam is allowing for no-fault divorce, it's basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, which is beautiful. And I don't want you to miss it. That sometimes we are going to do our due diligence, we're going to do our part, we're going to get married, but things are not going to work out. Not because one of us is actually bad. Not because one of us has done something wrong to us. Just simply because we're human beings and it didn't work out between us. And that's okay. And I think we need to love this about Islam, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how He understands human nature. And He's not putting it on us that once you're married, khalas, it's set in stone and there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot get out of it. So let's keep that in mind. So, no-fault divorce, please remember, this was established by Islam more than 1400 years ago. Western culture has only started doing the no-fault divorce in the 20th century only. So what's the definition of no-fault divorce? It's a dissolution of a marriage that doesn't require a showing of wrongdoing by either party. So there is no breach of marital contract. So you don't have to go and hire a private investigator to go and, find what the spouse is doing or even fake it. So we talked about this. Okay, now going into the two types, we have two types of divorce in Islam. One is called talaq, and one is called khula. Then there are two different types. And we usually, when we talk about divorce in Islam, we do not actually mention the khula one, which is actually very important and significant. And it's part of what Iman was talking about earlier, protecting the rights of the woman. So a talaq is usually done by the man, and there are conditions for how the talaq is done. It has to happen during a period when the woman can have sexual relations with her husband, and it has to happen during the period when there was no sexual relations. Okay, so he cannot divorce her if they had, for example, she's going through her tuhur, which is her pure time between the two periods, and he just had sex with her yesterday. He cannot come the following day and give her talaq. He has to wait until she has her period, and her period is over, okay? And then she's in her pure period again, and then if he wants to divorce her, he can divorce her. You see the restrictions on the man? It doesn't make it easy for the man to divorce. And after that, also the iddah, which is basically the period where we need to know if the woman is not pregnant or pregnant, is either 3 months or 3 periods, depending on if she is within a childbearing age or not. Woman has to stay in the marital home because he may change his mind. He may actually change his mind about the divorce and wants to keep her. He is given 2 chances of this kind of divorce, but after the 3rd time, it's final, and she cannot go back to him unless she actually marries somebody completely different, a stranger, and she actually consummate the marriage. Then, if she divorced that person, then she can go back to the first husband. And in talaq, the husband is the one who has to pay the money. He has to pay the wife some kind of compensation for divorcing her. This is in the situation of no-fault divorce. So he is divorcing her for no reason. Not because she, for example, cheated on him. Because if she cheated on him, he divorces her, but he doesn't pay her anything. You see the difference? Yeah? Now let's come to the khula, which is something that this is the woman's right. So this is basically the divorce that is done by the woman. And it can happen at any time. So the khula is not restricted to the pure period. It's not restricted to the, whether they had sex or had no sex. None of that stuff. If she is decided that khalas, she wants to do khula with her husband, she doesn't need to wait. Her iddah, which is basically the period to prove if she's pregnant or not, is only 1 month. Yeah. The woman leaves the house. Why? Because she's the one asking for divorce. So she cannot actually stay with this husband whom she's khalas, decided she doesn't want to be with him anymore. You see the huge differences, profound differences between the two. And the divorce is final. There is no after she leaves and after the iddah, she goes back to him and says, oh, please take me back. No. And she's the one who's going to compensate the husband. She's the one who's going to pay the husband money to compensate for, separating from him. Again, just like we said with talaq, if it's a no-fault divorce. However, if he had harmed her in any way, if he abused her, if he cheated on her, and she goes and she asks for khula, she doesn't need to pay him money back because it's a fault-based divorce at that time. Do you understand the difference? Any questions about this before I move on? No? Okay. So I'm not going to give you, these are the ayahs about the talaq. And this is the one about khula for women. It's in Surah Al-Baqarah, and it's ayah 229. Actually, I'm going to go back here. Let me share with you the reason why this ayah was really revealed. So this is the ayah that says the divorce is twice. This is for the husband, okay? So this is the divorce that's in the hand of the husband. So the divorce is twice. After that, either you retain her on reasonable terms or release her with kindness. And it is not lawful for you, men, to take back from your wives any of your mahar, which you have given them. Now, why was this ayah revealed? Interesting story. A woman came to the Aisha radiallahu anha and she told her, my husband has threatened that he is going to keep me suspended, meaning he is going to, swear divorce on me, and then just before the end of my iddah, he is going to take me back, and he has threatened that he's going to do this 100 times. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what oppression that would be for the woman? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came down with this ayah, limiting the numbers that a man can do this to the woman, to the 3. Okay? Now this is something I'm going to refer to also at the end of the, inshallah, the presentation. This is a hadith that we use to establish the permissibility of khula', which is the divorce by the woman. So it's narrated that the wife of Thabit bin Qais bin Shammas, came to the Prophet ﷺ and she told him, and please pay attention to the words that are used. She told him, O Prophet of Allah, I do not criticize his character nor his faith, but I am worried about my ability to perform my duties toward him. And the Prophet ﷺ told her, would you give him back his garden? And she said, yes. And the Prophet ﷺ, told the husband, accept the garden and release her. Now, I want you to pay attention to what she said. She is owning responsibility here. She's saying that there is nothing that I'm criticizing in his character, his personality, in his, faith, and we are told in another narration that she was, standing and she looked out at the group of men and her husband was amongst them. And she looked and she saw that her husband was the shortest and was the ugliest. And in that moment, she had a change of heart towards her husband. So she could no longer look at him with, feeling good about him. Okay? And we're told that this is the reason why she went to the Prophet ﷺ and told him, that I want to actually release, myself from him. And she is owning responsibility. I want you please to keep that in mind. She's saying the reason why I want the release, not because he's a bad person, but it has to do with me. I had a change of heart with regards to him. And I want to be released. And that's very legitimate within the Islamic parameters. It's fine. Okay, moving on. So we talked about that. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the research that within the American Muslim community about divorce. This is a picture of the late Dr. Ilyas Bayounis. May he, Allah yarhamu. He was a very well-known sociologist within the American Muslim community. He was the first one to raise the alarm about divorce within our community. And he did actually a study about the rate of divorce in American Muslim community. So we're not going to go into a lot of details about his study, but whenever you hear people quoting the 30% divorce rate in the American Muslim community, it's actually based on his study. Okay? And this was done in the late 1990s, early 2000s. So he had this. I couldn't have access to exactly how he did the study, so I can't give you a lot of details, but I'll share with you what I know. So he had a divorce couple sample, and these are some of the findings that he found. So he noticed that the first thing he noticed was three things. There was a difference in terms of Islamic activities between the men and the women. So he found out that the women were actually, in the sample, again, in the sample, he found out that the women are much more practicing and the men were not as practicing as the women. So it was more like almost 80% of the women were practicing and almost 80% of the men were not practicing. And that caused some tension there. And his definition of practicing was whether you pray regularly, attend the mosque, and objection to alcohol and extramarital affairs. He also noticed in his sample that his sample could be divided into a young cohort, so younger participant, and an older cohort. The younger cohort, I think he was also the first one to notice this, that we had women who were born and raised in the US and their husbands were immigrant, who came, from other countries. And that caused what he called a cultural dissonance because, completely two different cultures. And in the older group, both men and women were immigrants. They both immigrated. But the differences had to do more with, the Islamic activity, and also had to do with the professional and educational level. There was, like the women usually were not educated, the men were educated, women were not, and they were not also, in professional fields. So he concluded that the variables correlated with divorce in his own sample had to do with the cultural dissonance, and I told you, explained to you, I mean, it happened in the younger cohort, not the older, and the professional and educational differences that he noticed in the older cohort, and a moral dissonance in terms of like the practice of faith, okay? And I would say this issue of moral dissonance is not only restricted to his sample. You know, I remember I grew up in the Middle East. This idea of the woman being more practicing than the husband is actually very common. Very, very common in the Middle East. But somehow it was accepted and it wasn't causing a lot of problems. Why? Because we're talking about a society that was much more conservative and more conforming to, you know, some social values that actually align with Islam. So you could see that it will cause more problems in the US than, you know, in the Middle East, even though it's present in both societies. Okay, so that was the study by Allah yarhamu, Dr. Ilyas Bayunis. Now moving on, we have another study that was done in 2010 by Sound Vision. And I'm not gonna go into all the details, but I want to bring your attention that they found that in almost 50% of the men got remarried, and only about 27% of the women, divorced women, got remarried, which goes back to what the sister was saying about the cultural messages about divorce, that women will have a harder time getting remarried after divorce. When they asked about what are the reasons for divorce, they got the highest percentage for people saying that we were incompatible. And the incompatibility included different things. So it was religion, it was worldview, how we deal with life. The second highest was abuse. And almost 50% of the reported abuse was emotional and verbal. Financial disputes, in-laws, and sexual infidelity. In their also demographics, they said that the sample, 2/3 of the sample had children, and 75% of the women ended up with having the custody of the children after divorce, while only 25% of the men did. When they asked the question, did you seek help, to resolve your differences? So 28% said, yes, we sought the help of family and relatives. 22% sought the help of imams. Friends, 22%. Unfortunately, only 9% went to Muslim counselors, and 7% went to non-Muslim counselors. I would love to see these two percentages go up. So I'm going to tell you, it doesn't have to be a Muslim counselor. If there is a family that's struggling with this issue, just go seek counseling and therapy before you actually make the final decision. Then they asked them, how was the community response to your divorce? So look at this. 25% had a negative reaction, and 31% had a neutral reaction. Nothing. And only 13% had a positive reaction to their divorce. And when they asked them, are you better off divorced? 91% said yes. And that takes us back to what I told you in the beginning. Why did Islam, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make divorce permissible? Because it's it's a necessary step in some situations. It's an important way out after we have tried everything that we can. Then the question was, did you get enough support from the community? 50% said no. 50% said no. They did not get enough support from the community, even though they haven't done anything wrong. They did something halal. They did something permissible. But the cultural messages and the cultural baggage that we carry about divorce becomes the barrier. Doesn't allow us to actually be there for our brothers and sisters, unfortunately. Okay, this is a study I did 2007. Okay, so in my sample, The divorce rate was 21.3. What was interesting in my sample is that I noticed that there is a peak, a higher rate of divorce in the age group over 56, which was basically reflective of what we started seeing in our community. It's like you have husband and wife who stay together for the sake of the children. Once the children grow older, then they go, okay, I don't need to stay anymore with you. Why be in misery? I'm going to divorce you. Okay. Yes?
I have a friend that her parents did this. She's about 40 years old now.
40? Yeah.
She said that once they figured out why they were doing it, they wished they wouldn't have put the whole family through the trouble.
So they wish that they actually had done the divorce earlier, right?
Because they saw the parents suffering.
Yeah. Yes. And we're going to talk about this in a bit when we, when we talk about the impact of divorce. Okay, when I asked about the reasons for divorce in my study, the highest rate was 30% for other. I had actually missed two important criteria for reasons for divorce. One was infidelity and the other one was in-laws. I had not written them as part of my reasons. So I don't know what the other is. But this is what was concerning for me. The second highest was abuse. And again, it was all sorts of abuse, the physical, mental, verbal, emotional, and all of that stuff. Lack of respect or love was 13%. Differences in life attitude was 11.4. Personality differences 10. Mixed, which means like mixed of all of the factors I listed, was about 9%. Too much fighting was 6%, and differences in religious attitude was 4.3%. Okay, moving into the impact of divorce. Of course, this is very evident. The impact on the husband and wife is going to fall along one of these four main areas. Financially, because you go from, one household into two separate households now. So we're going to start talking about, paying more for rent, paying more for everything, okay? Not only rent, but food, everything. Instead of combining it together, now it's two separate households. And if you have children, also you have the children going back and forth between the two households. So you need to have two big households to actually accommodate the children. So financially, it becomes a big burden. Career, because when you're living together, you can actually support each other in your career. You can find, your spouse could be there to, for example, take care of the kids while you're going off to work. But if you're on your own, having to handle it, and handle everything, something is going to, give. Support. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about marriage? He said marriage is a source of sakina. What is sakina? Sakina is like, when you feel like, you are tranquil because you feel that you have someone next to you who is actually dealing with life, with you. And of course, the emotional pain. I think this is the worst one. The emotional pain after divorce is just too strong. There are so many conflicting emotions going on within the husband and the wife. There is a lot of guilt. There is a lot of questioning. There is a lot of anger. There is a lot of self-doubt, and suspecting one's sense of worth. Many things go on with this one. According to the CDC report in May 2000, these are some of the areas where they have seen the impact of divorce. So there is a decrease in psychological well-being, decrease in the levels of happiness and self-acceptance, increase in health problems, increase in mortality risk, increase in social isolation, increase in negative life events, and increase in depression and alcohol use. Now, I would add to this happens, okay, if you don't believe that your divorce was actually necessary or you haven't thought about it well before you did it. Because, again, as I told you, like, for example, if we had an abusive family, the wife decided to divorce, she's not going to be feeling this. She's going to struggle in the beginning because she will have to, stand on her own 2 feet and find her way and be strong. But she's going to be happy to be divorced. So it depends. I'm attributing a lot of this also to maybe people jumping on the divorce wagon for unnecessary reasons. But if you do it for necessary reasons, that's not necessarily what's going to happen. Impact on children. The loss of the family unit, again, economic loss, increase of life stressors, especially if the parents are not working together as a team after divorce. Huge problem. Lack of security and safety because of poor parental adjustment. So let me give you an example of what happens sometimes after divorce. Not with everybody. I mean, there are some people who divorce and they do it beautifully. They're well adjusted. The children handle it well because the parents are handling it well. But there are situations where one of the spouses, for example, could have been emotionally dependent on the other spouse. And then the divorce happens. And then this spouse, who was emotionally dependent, who do you think is seeking? Who do you think this spouse is going to seek now for emotional support? The children. And that becomes a huge, big burden on the children. And if you ever heard of the word parentification, basically one of the children becomes a parent because this child steps into the void, because this parent is feeling the void and projecting the void on the children because they're going like, poor me, look what did to me, and look what they're doing. So there is bad-mouthing happening also. So that in that particular situation, the children are not going to feel secure and safe. Here we go. The parentified child. And the children, if they're exposed to the conflict between the parents, and the children are made the go-between, like, go tell your father, 1, 2, 3, 4. Go tell your mom, 1, 2, 3, 4. They can no longer be children because they're pulled into this adult role when, they're still young. And I am always thinking about what messages are the children taking away. If they are taking away the message that divorce is sometimes necessary because, we couldn't, work together, but we're working together now after divorce and we both love you and life is okay, that's fine. But if we're taking any other negative messages following divorce, we have a problem. Have a major problem. Still we're talking about the impact of divorce on children. So the emotional pain for children, not most of the time, it depends on the parent. We have parents who are very sensitive and they're very in tune with what's going on, with their children. And they're actually taking steps, to be proactive. I have a father right now, in therapy who's amazing, really amazing. I love this father, honestly. He is, mashallah, very in tune with what's going on. He comes in and he says, Noha, this is is happening. What do you think I need to do? Amazing father. I would love for all fathers to be like him because he's doing a great job, mashallah. So the emotional pain of children can be hidden unless the parents are sensitive to it, unless the parents are checking in, unless the parents are actually observing, unless the parents are engaged, unless the parents are really there, so when something happens, they're actually immediately responding to it. Emotional pain becomes pathology in 20% of divorce cases. And the reason why it becomes a pathology is because, unfortunately, the parents did not handle it. I'm so sorry. But that's the reality, yes. So we start actually going into the children exhibit some serious mental disorders. So I'll give you an example. Pathology could be the children going and using drugs when they're teens, Pathology could be children becoming, part of the gang members. Pathology could be that they're becoming very rebellious and, they get in trouble with the law. Does that answer your question? Good, okay. And the following factors have been actually correlated with when the pain becomes a pathology. socioeconomic status in terms of why. Because if the parents are just trying to survive, they don't have enough money, and they're just trying to survive, so they don't have enough energy to actually be with the children and pay attention to the children. Social support. If the parents don't have enough social support around them, so they can actually then extend support to their children. Parenting competencies. This is, when we talked about, are the parents able to parent well? Sometimes what happens with divorce, and I get this in my office a lot. So I get a divorced parent in my office, and, he or she is telling me that my child, has done this, something like that. And then I go like, so why didn't you do 1, 2, 3, some kind of discipline? And the response I get from the spouse or the parent is, because I felt guilty. Because I felt that my child is already suffering because of the divorce, so I didn't want to be mean by saying, no, you cannot do this or you cannot do that. But what is the long-term ramification of such parenting is you end up with a child who has never learned limits. You end up with a child who is not going to be able to be a responsible adult. So just because we're feeling guilty in the moment, we are allowing for long-term harm to happen. That's the worst thing we can do for our children. So I'm inviting you to shift your thinking about like haram, poor them. They didn't ask for that. We're the ones who divorced. I understand that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. Human beings are created in constant turmoil. It's okay for them to go through pain. It's okay. It will only make them stronger if you actually handle it well. But if you go ahead and spoil them, oh my God, yeah. Okay, and the last one here is personality dynamics of the parents. There are some parents, again, remember the example I told you about the emotionally dependent parent? Okay, so that's a personality dynamic. That's causing a lot of burden on the children. Symptoms to watch out for. This relates to your question. So what to look for to make sure that, inshallah, things are going well with the children. Check and see if there's any signs of low self-esteem, difficulty focusing, extreme sadness. We're not talking about regular sadness. We all have to be sad every now and then. That's part of life. So for your child to experience sadness every now and then, no problem. It's okay. You just have to empower them by teaching them how to deal with the sadness. But all the time sadness is a problem. Mood swings, irritability, secretiveness or isolation, self-blame, Sometimes they will blurt out and say, oh, Mom, it was my mistake. I'm the reason why you actually divorced. That's a red flag. That's a huge red flag, yes.
This also happens with families that aren't divorced as well, because the families that stay together but are dysfunctional and the kids have the same symptoms.
Thank you very much. You're absolutely. Did you hear him? He's talking about a lot of this also could happen in families that stay together. You're right. But they are dysfunctional because they're fighting a lot. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. Eating disorders, behaving perfectly. So like, I'm going to become the good child. Why? Because I don't want to burden my mom. I don't want to burden my dad. I'm always going to be, perfect. That's not good. Accident prone. Stealing, skipping school, underachieving, sexual acting out, and drug use. Some of the symptoms to look for. When is the Maghrib going to be? Now? Okay, so I am going to actually stop here. So inshallah, we're going to go pray Maghrib, and then inshallah, when we come back, we're going to go ahead and talk about to divorce or not, and then move on, inshallah. Making sure. Inshallah, ya Rabbi. Yeah, because I worry. So inshallah, we'll go ahead and continue, bismillah. So we're going to go ahead and start talking about the process of do we divorce or not. This is a very difficult process for people when they come to this point in their life where they need to kind of like think about, do we need to consider divorce or not? I personally had to go through that time. Like I was, having difficulties with my husband for 5 to 7 years. It was a long time. And I remember distinctly, thinking about divorce a lot. But alhamdulillah, at that time, remember the same father who told me when I was going to get married and, I'm worried, and he's telling me, if things don't work out, we're going to, you can divorce and come back home. He's the same father who worked with me and my husband so we can actually reconcile our differences. And what my father said at that time, which was very important, and I hope we keep in mind as we consider the point always of divorce or not, that he said there weren't really any, huge and big red flags that indicate that you have to divorce. So basically, it's just that you and him are having a difficulty dealing with your lack of expectations from the marriage, because you went into the marriage with certain expectations. They're not materializing, they're not happening. You need to kind of like grieve the loss of those expectations. But basically, both of you are decent people. And I'm not seeing anything that indicates to me that you actually need to separate. So we're going to go ahead and start, try and work. And I'll tell you, as long as I was blaming my husband, as long as I was in the position of going like, my husband is and that's why things are not working out, we could not move forward. When I started actually owning responsibility for what I'm doing, what I control, what I can change, that's when things actually changed. And that's when I was able to move forward. But again, I'm reminding you, because the foundation was good. So I'm not talking about that this is working, that's going to work in every marriage. If there is an abusive relationship, no, that's not going to work, okay? Even though I have to tell you, there are spouses who actually choose to stay in an abusive marriage for whatever reason. It works for them for whatever reason. But there are people who are doing that. I remember one of my mentors, she's a therapist, her name is Salma Bugderi. So she works in Virginia. Her first therapy case as an intern was actually doing counseling and therapy with a woman who was being abused by her husband. And she was really, we're talking about severe abuse here. And Salma was like outraged. It's like, this is not right. This is outrageous. How could you stay with him? How could you remain married to him? How could you? Because Salma is coming like, you don't have to stay with him. You have rights. You're living in the US. You can just divorce him. The woman insisted on staying with him. And Salma could not understand. She couldn't fathom what. She's still in the beginning of her career, right? So she couldn't get it. Why is she staying in such a horrible marriage? And she meets the woman, I don't know, like 10 years later, and the woman said, I wasn't ready for that when you said that. So that takes us to, let's talk about divorce or not to divorce from a research point of view. From a psychological research point of view, there is conflicting research. So you have research that supports, yes, you need to go ahead and divorce, and you have research that says, no, don't divorce, because the impact of the divorce is actually very negative on the families and the children, okay? But if we were to look at maybe a criteria that will define when is the divorce okay and when it's not okay, is something that some of you mentioned here, which the brother here, he mentioned. But if the family is so dysfunctional that there is always conflict and there is always fight and the children are always exposed to this dysfunction and this fight, then they're better off divorced. Okay? I see in my office the impact of families where abuse was happening, where the children actually observed and watched the abuse, and some of them had to become the parentified child where they actually had to defend the abused parent. And whether a boy or a girl, and I have seen the impact on the emotional and psychological well-being of these children when they became adult. They were scarred for life. Seriously scarred for life. So we're talking about like serious problems. So one criteria is to look at, is the conflict, is it a very high conflict family? Then maybe maybe divorce is better than staying together to preserve the family. Especially in our community, we talk about, no, we cannot break up the family, and divorce is not, an option. We need to it's better to keep the family together. No, it's not better to keep the family together if there is a lot of conflict and if there is a lot of abuse. But having said that, it remains a very individual decision. Just like the case with Selma. Like Selma was telling the woman, you need to divorce him, and the woman said, no, I'm not going to divorce him. It's a very personal and very individual choice. Okay? We can just support the people who are involved or whom we see that are going through a hard time, but they need to come to their own decisions. So in another research, it was found that 2 out of 3 unhappily married families. So we're not talking about abusive families here. We're talking about families that went through a period, just kind of like me and my husband. We went through a period when we were saying like, okay, we're not happy, things are not working out, but there isn't a lot of conflict. There isn't abuse, period, going on. So 2 out of 3 unhappily married couples who avoided separation or divorce were happy 5 years later. I see myself as one of these, people where I had to struggle with a period of unhappiness for, as I told you, 5 to 7 years. Until I shifted. Again, like I told you, I was unhappy because I'm so focused on blaming him. And I'm not owning responsibility for my own happiness. And no one can make me happy. I'm the only one who can make myself happy. When I started shifting to actually focusing on how am I going to take care of myself and my life and be happy, then my relationship with my husband improved. Okay, again, reminding you, the goal of Sharia, no harm to be done to oneself or to others. La darara wa la dirar, one of the major principles of Islam. So, I'm going to go through different ideas with this idea of divorce or not. It is very subjective, meaning you cannot decide for someone else what they can tolerate or not tolerate. So please stop telling people, yes, divorce, yes, stay. Just listen to them, be with them, okay? And this actually applies to any person who is actually even considering divorce. It's a very subjective decision. So no one can tell you, yes, if 1, 2, 3, and 4 are happening, then you divorce. If 5, 6, 7 are not happening, then you stay. None of that stuff. It's a very subjective decision. Because it depends on the person, what they can tolerate, circumstances, what's going on in their life, the context. Sometimes a change in the context of life could cause the divorce to happen when, it wasn't expected, out of the blue. Next one, this is something that we are going through right now in the younger generation. You hear it a lot from the younger generation. They come to you, and this is the Hollywood syndrome, which is basically, I'm not happy, that's why I'm going to divorce. Okay? So please, let's let go of I'm not happy. This I'm not happy is so vague. I want you to kind of focus it and narrow it down, and this is where we're going to come to how do you do it. So I'm inviting someone who is considering divorce to do the formula, assets and shortcomings, which means the following. So I'm going to sit down, paper and pencil, okay? And actually, I'm going to write down what are the assets of me staying in the marriage, what are the shortcomings of me leaving, of staying in the marriage. Okay, sorry, I need to, okay. I actually have my clients do 2 formulas. So I have a form that is actually created by Dr. Burns. Okay, so the form is, you have the page and it's divided into 4 quadrants, and you have option A and option B. So let's say option A is marriage, and option B is divorce. Okay? So you go ahead and write the pros for option A, which is marriage here. The cons or shortcomings of option A here. And you do the same for option B. Okay? And you may say, okay, why are we doing both marriage and divorce? They should be the same. They're not the same, because you're going to see them differently. So the pros and cons may look as if it's like the opposite on each side, but it's not. Just, I have my clients go through this. And then there is a numerical formula that we follow, and it gives them ultimately kind of like a number. It shows them which one weighs more for them, because it's a very subjective formula. Meaning, you could have only, for example, 2 items here under the pro for A, and for example, for the cons, you have, for example, 7. But the 2 items here outweigh the items here. So it's very subjective. It's not about how many number of items do I have in each column. It's you're going to look, and you're going to assess and give numbers, and then subjectively, okay, through your own assessment, you're going to decide which one which one weighs more for you than the other, the divorce or the marriage. So it's a process that I highly encourage anyone who is maybe going through that phase. Another invitation when it comes to the process of whether we're divorcing or not, to really own responsibility. So what do I mean by that? If you are the one who is asking for the divorce, or you're the one who's saying that you want to divorce, then I actually want you to say to yourself and to your spouse, I am divorcing because, you see what? I am divorcing because 1, 2, 3, 4. Not to say he or she is, and that's why, we're divorcing. You see the difference? One is about I am divorcing because I cannot tolerate or I cannot deal with, whatever it is. I'm owning responsibility. Kind of exactly what the wife of Thabit bin Qais, the one, we mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. What did she tell the Prophet? She didn't blame the husband. She didn't go like the husband is like, doing this and that. No, she said, my heart has changed towards him. That's why I want to divorce him. She owned the responsibility. And that's extremely important. If you own responsibility for your decisions, there won't be a lot of emotional turmoil because you're owning responsibility, not putting the blame on someone else. Because when you put the blame on other people, you become helpless because you don't have control over other people. If you're just going to put your frustration over he is like this and she is like this and poor me, what have you done? You lost control. Now, let's assume you're not asking for divorce, but the spouse is divorcing you, which happens. You don't want the divorce. I see it in my office sometimes. I get someone who actually is insisting on divorce. The other person actually wants to stay in the marriage. If you are not the one who's asking for divorce, so I want you to actually tell that to yourself. I want you to tell yourself, I am not choosing to divorce. Okay? I actually wanted to stay in this marriage. We are divorcing because he or she, and kind of like check into what he or she is saying, that they're divorcing. Now be very careful because there could be a lot of blame dumping here. which is basically, if the other person is not owning responsibility for their choice, they can come and say, well, I'm divorcing you because you're lazy. I'm divorcing you because, I don't know, you're not a good housekeeper. I'm divorcing you because you're not spending enough time with me. This is blame. This is not owning responsibility. Okay? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move into minimizing the impact of divorce. So before divorce, if you're going through this process, the one I was telling you about, when you're asking the question, do I divorce or don't I divorce, or I shouldn't divorce, please choose wisely the family and friends you're going to talk to about this issue. Okay? Because you have some family and friends who are going to be there for you in terms of supporting you and really encouraging you to work and think through this process. You have some family and friends who are actually going to egg you on and make you even more angry and more upset and make you feel like you're a victim. Okay? And like I told you with my father, may Allah bless him, when he talked to me and my husband, he didn't talk about who to blame. He was talking about, you guys have differences, and they are major differences, and we need to compromise. We need to work through them. And that's what he worked on. He avoided blame completely. Completely. So choose carefully. Counseling. Not because I'm a therapist, wallahi. But really, please seek some counseling. If you're in that process of not knowing, what do you want to do? Assess the formula. You know the formula I told you about here? You know the divorce and the pros and cons of both? And own responsibility. That is going to save you a lot of pain if you're focusing on owning responsibility yourself rather than blaming the spouse. Take time to figure things out. You do not need to do it overnight. There's no need to. You've been married already. So take as much time as you need to have clarity. And what do I mean by clarity? You're going to reach to a point, and that's what happened to me. Like I had 5-7 years where like, do I divorce? Do I don't divorce? Do I stay? Do I leave? Right? But at some point, I had come to the point where like, you know what? No, I'm not going to divorce. And that's when I had clarity. Khalas, for sure, I knew I'm not divorcing. This is how I'm going to deal with the situation. That's what I'm talking about. So give yourself as much time as you need to figure it out. And self-care. Self-care is very important. Whether you're going through troubles or you're not going through troubles, please, self-care is very important. What do I mean by self-care? I mean that you take time on a daily basis to really re-energize and rejuvenate yourself. And you're the only one who can decide what works for you. Because something like I love reading, for example. My self-care every night, before I go to bed, I have to read fiction. I'm not reading good books, no. I'm reading fiction, which is a waste of time in the eyes of some people. But for me, they are my self-care, okay? So I'm inviting each one of you, if like today none of this is important to you, at least you leave today with the idea of I have to do self-care on a daily basis and figure out what would work for you. During and after the divorce, what to do? Again, choose wisely your friends and family who are next to you. Self-care. You see why I put self-care all the way up here? Because it becomes even more critical when you are going through a divorce and after a divorce immediately. The emotional toll is so strong and so powerful. You really need to take care of yourself. So minimize some of the stuff that's on your plate and make sure you're directing some of your energy towards yourself to take care of yourself. You're not going to be selfish. This is very important for you. Counseling, again, is very important, and owning responsibility. I think I've said that so many times already now. And then in the Quran, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about divorce, He's using two words, two beautiful words. He's using taqwa, which means like in all of your interactions with your spouse as you are going through the divorce, make sure you're remembering Allah. Make sure you're aware that Allah is aware of what you're saying and what you're doing. Because it's very easy for the ego to actually come up when we're going through the divorce. It's very ego for us to start thinking about, oh, I want to take my revenge on him or on her. I want to hurt them because they did this to me. But if you're focused and you're revolving around taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah in Surah Al-Talaq, which is Surah 65 in the Quran, it's a very short surah, it's 12 ayahs. Highly encourage you to read it about the subject, talaq. He's talking about if you are keeping Allah in front of your eyes, in your sight, Allah will open up doors for you. And He will make things easy for you. As long as you're remembering Him and you're fearing Him in everything that you are doing as you are going through this very difficult process. Because it's a very, very, like all the evil tendencies of human beings can come through this process. You will be amazed. Like you would hear of people who supposedly are very good, and then they're going through divorce, and you hear the weirdest things about how they're behaving. I know, I had a client who's Egyptian. So in Egypt, they have a specific guidelines about who buys the furniture and who brings the apartment. They have very, right? Malak? Okay, so this person is going through divorce in Egypt, right? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, okay, she had bought the furniture. Isn't it on the wife? Depends, okay. So she bought the furniture. So this husband of hers, the ex-husband, he actually fraudulently, made up some receipts to show that he's the one who bought the furniture. And he had witnesses lying, so that he can get the furniture. This is what I'm talking about. Some of the evil tendencies of people come up through this process. So taqwa, and the other word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also uses whenever He is talking about talaq and divorce is ma'ruf. And ma'ruf in this particular context is basically to treat the other with kindness, to treat the other with goodness, to treat the other with the best possible treatment. So ma'ruf and taqwa. And I think this is my last slide. Oh, okay, no. Okay, how others can help. So how can we help people who are going through divorce? Please, we can connect and support. A lot of people, what they do when they know about someone going through divorce, they actually stop talking to them. They avoid them, they don't talk to them, they don't connect with them. They need you. That's when they need you. So please make sure you actually call them. I'm not saying call to pry and call to like maybe, spy on them. No, call and say, I'm worried about you. Is there anything I can do for you? Not because you want to know what's going on in their lives and all the, grisly details. No, because you want to support them. Include them. You have no idea how many times I've heard from people who went through divorce and they say, after we were divorced, nobody would invite us. Just because we're divorced. So include them, invitations. Please consider it. It's not a failure on the part of the husband or the wife. And no one can know what happened, by the way. Even when they tell you the story. Allah knows. And they only know. So let's avoid labeling it and judging it as a failure. And respecting them as human beings. And dealing with them as such. Not that they have done some really horrible, deed. Respect their privacy. Don't pry. There's no need for you to know the details of what's going on. And don't be one of the people who is transmitting gossip. If it comes to you, let it stop there. Don't take it to someone else. Please. And because our community, mashallah, loves to talk and gossip. And then defend the honor of the people who are involved in this. Don't allow people to just, disgrace them or demean them. Don't allow it to happen. It's in our hands to actually stop all of this, nonsense happening in our community. Oh, I forgot about this one. Ooh. Okay, let's see. Very quickly, this is a study that looked at family ties after divorce. So it was a longitudinal study that went on for 20 years. And they looked at 98 pairs who went through divorce. So 50% or more than 50% of the people involved said that the divorce was actually much more harder than the remarriage. And 1/3 said that the remarriage created more distress. And as we said here somewhere in the beginning, that the percentage of fathers who got remarried was much more higher than the mothers. What actually was helpful for the well-being of children is that when the parents were cooperating and collaborating and working together, that's when the well-being of the children was actually the best. So, and the children said that they didn't want their parents to be friends. They weren't looking for that. All they wanted is that the parents are cordial and civil to each other. They're not bad-mouthing each other, behind each other's back, and they were not asked to take sides. That's very important for children. They're very young. They don't need to be caught in the loyalty battle. Like if you are smiling to your mom, that means you actually are not siding by me. No, let them be the children of your spouse and just enjoy them. Allow them to be. And when the parents actually collaborated, the relationship with the father was actually better or stayed stable. Now, in this study, they found that the mothers are the gatekeepers, mostly. Meaning the mothers were the people who either who influenced or impacted how good the relationship was between the children and the father. Because most of the mothers had more custody than the children in this study. When the parents actually had a conflictual relationship, the father-child relationship was impacted, and there was a lot of loyalty conflicts, and there was a disconnection from the extended family, specifically from the father's family. Again, because the mother is the gatekeeper, as I told you. And they highlighted that the relationship between the divorced parent ended up impacting 4 generations of the family. Think about it. Grandparents, the parents, the children, and then the grandchildren. So if the parents didn't collaborate, there was a disconnection along the 4 generations. Okay, minimizing the impact of divorce. This is key. If there is a divorce to happen, focus on improving parenting skills. Take a parenting class. Really focus on how are we going to collaborate as parents, since we are, already separated. Let's make sure we are not using our guilt, because we're so sorry for our children because they're going through divorce, to actually end up spoiling them. You're going to end up with irresponsible adults. Let's make sure we are not depending on our children for the emotional void. So make the children adults before they necessarily are growing. Educate mothers to understand how kids will benefit from their relationship with their fathers so that they don't actually inhibit any interaction with the father. Mother assess her gatekeeping role and reduce hostilities between the parents, and the father's continuous emotional engagement with the kids was extremely important for the health and the well-being of the children. Takeaway from today, I hope, that divorce in Islam is actually necessary in some situations. It's a very subjective decision. So don't judge and don't label anyone who's going divorce and say they shouldn't have divorce. It's a very personal, individual decision. Let's hope that when people are going through divorce, they own responsibility for the decision, for why they're doing it. And let's hope that they are going to work on minimizing the impact of the divorce on the children and on themselves. And let's hope we're inviting the community to become more supportive of people who are going through divorce, rather than isolate and disengage and disconnect from them. Okay, I think this is my last slide. Yes, okay. So, questions? Yes, Malak. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So your question is, when people are going through uh, a lot of conflict and a lot of tension, should they stay together and try and work it out, or should they separate and go to the family, respective family homes, right? Yeah. 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 So you're saying that a lot of women in our community, they run immediately, quickly to the family instead of staying and kind of like trying to deal with the problem. Um, definitely, when there is conflict, I am inviting the couple to actually work through the problems, yes, rather than running away and hiding from them. However, there are certain situations where there is a need for the separation. So I cannot just have a blank statement. Um, if there is abuse, for example, okay, and the wife or the husband, because believe it or not, husbands are also abused. It's not only wives, even though the percentage of women abused is higher uh, than the husbands. But still, if there is abuse, maybe it's a good idea to separate and then, look through counseling or reconciliation to work through the problems. So it depends. It's very, very subjective. Okay, it depends so much on the context. It's very difficult for me to give like a very specific answer because it changes from one situation to another. So, okay. Any other questions? Yes. Is there something, is there anything separate in Islam? Okay. As we, shown in the talaq ayahs, okay, the 3-month iddah. So in Islam, it's actually recommended that there is no separation. When the husband is doing the talaq, okay. Why? Because when you're staying together, you can actually, the daily interactions can soften your heart. With the khula, for the woman, as you saw, she doesn't stay in the husband's household. She actually leaves, So it varies. I know that there are certain situations where people feel like, okay, we're going to separate to see how it feels and then decide if we're going to divorce or not. And nowadays, in our life, how we're living our lives right now, that's feasible. People can do it. And I don't see anything wrong with doing that, as long as mutually, they're agreeing on that. Did I answer your question? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes. Highly, highly recommend therapy. Highly recommend therapy, because what happens in that situation is there is a lot of dynamic that has been internalized unconsciously. So it's very important to go through counseling and therapy so that that can be uncovered and it doesn't become the triggers in the marriage. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Yes. If it depends on the situation. It depends if the kids have been exposed to the abuse really a lot, or was the abuse happening behind doors. You see, so again, if the children have seen the abuse, by all means, it's better to have them go through counseling and therapy, okay, and make sure everything comes out rather than wait until problems happen. Did I answer your question? Yes. Okay. And for children, young children, the best therapy is play therapy. So it's not talk. They actually process all of their feelings through play. It's actually beautiful, very beautiful. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Okay, if the husband bring the other woman in the marriage? And is it a haram or is it adultery?
Again,
can't
say it again.
If the husband marry another woman and brought it in your marriage, or be like second wife or third wife of his.
Yeah.
So is it an adultery? Is it counted as adultery? In American way it does. It's like cheating. But how about in Islamic way?
Okay, so was there actually a marriage contract?
Yeah, no, but he didn't. The person doesn't know that he married. He found out from somebody else that he has another wife somewhere else.
I understand.
Yeah.
But there is a marriage contract.
Verbally, because in America you cannot have more than one wife, right? So in paperwork, no.
Yeah. So, okay, here we're talking about religious, from a religious point of view, and from a legal and civil point of view.
Legal, I know it's not
Legal,
supposed to be.
the marriage is not valid from
Right.
a legal point of view,
Right.
right? From a religious point of view, the marriage is valid. But are the rights of the second wife protected? No. I mean,
So it's not going to count as an adultery in Islam?
no, because
No.
you're telling me there is a contract, some sort
Yeah.
of contract, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, nikah.
Yeah, it's not, no. From an Islamic point of view, it's not going to be considered adultery. No.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And let me say something here, because this is happening somewhat in our community. So I usually, my advice for the first wife, okay, is not to seek divorce. Okay.
Allows the husband to let the first wife know
Yes.
that he's
Yeah.
getting married,
Yeah.
but he's like hiding and third person is coming and telling you that he does have another wife.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. That's, but I
So
mean, I'm
too much
looking,
emotional
Pain.
and yeah,
I
pain.
understand.
Yeah.
But think about it. If she were to divorce him, okay, she is going to miss out on some of her, lifestyle. And so I'm
The
talking.
emotional toll and plus the financially, yeah.
Yes.
Of course.
So again, we go back to what I was saying about it's very subjective,
Yeah.
right? But I usually talk to the first wife and I say, okay, if all of your rights are taken care of, okay, think about what your life is going to be after you divorce him just because you're very upset because he took a second wife. How is your life going to be? Some of these first wives, the one I'm talking about, have never worked in their life. Never worked in their life. So I'm like, okay, just because you're very upset because he took a second wife, you're going to, and I see it as you're going to harm yourself now. You're going to put yourself in a situation where you're not going to be able to take care of yourself. But again, it's a very subjective decision. Because I know some of the first wives, they tell me, no, this is too much. It's very painful. I cannot say. Okay, fine, no problem. But be very conscious and have your eyes open as to how your life is going to be after the divorce. This is the owning responsibility part that, I'm inviting, people to do.
Okay.
Yeah?
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
So she said, I'm getting a divorce. That's what she told me. Okay, they started with the legal points, and he gave her her mu'akhar.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
Yeah.
And after that said, what happened? She said, I'm not getting a divorce anymore. He did not divorce me the religion way. He just divorced me the legal way, which is the
Through
United
the court.
States. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Now, and she stayed. Now my question is, he had the intention of divorcing her. Would still the divorce, the marriage, because the sheikh? Now, I don't understand it,
So you're telling me legally in the U.S. she has been divorced?
Yeah, he wanted to divorce her completely, but they started with the legal things and they finished everything, and somehow he said no, I don't want to divorce you, and he kept her. So she said he did not divorce me the legal way, Sharia.
No. I'm talking
Yeah.
about in the court. In the
Yes.
court. Did she get a divorce from the court?
Yes, she did.
Wow. Wow. Okay, she's divorced.
So this is what I am. For me, take the explanation by myself that she had the intention to. He has the intention to divorce her anyway. I keep telling her, and this is happening with many of my sisters that I know about.
And they are going to the imam, and
You
they're
know-
telling the imam this, and the imam is telling them, you are really still married to
I
him,
thi- I
even
don't
though
think
the
she
court
did.
is
She
saying
said,
you're not.
well, he did not divorce me, Sharia, but he has the intention.
Habibti.
Yes, it's
Habibti.
الأعمال بالنيات. I wish she
Habibti.
was here today. If I knew.
Let me say, let's have Ikram answer. Ikram,
Okay.
answer it. Habibti.
No, I'm saying probably she didn't ask an imam. Probably the husband convinced her that the divorce did not really happen. Because if she asked an imam, most likely he would have told her that by signing that paper, then she is divorced.
There you go. There you go. She needs to actually go and talk to the imam.
Everything. And I am really. My point that he already had the intention.
No,
of
that's
doing
not the
all that.
point.
Yes.
No, that's not the point. The point is there is a paper from the court,
Yes.
legally,
Uh-huh.
from the court
American
system,
court,
okay?
yes.
She is actually divorced.
Yes.
And let me say the following. Alhamdulillah, in Islam, okay, whether for marriage or divorce, we do not need an imam to sanction that.
Yes.
So يعني just because he's telling her the imam didn't, do the religious, there is nothing called religious divorce. The religious divorce is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran is talking about in terms of the taqwa, in terms of like, I am saying anti-talaq, you are divorced, and then I haven't had relationships with you for 3 months, okay, and you're not pregnant, and I decided not to keep you for after the 3 months, you're divorced, khalas.
Yes.
You don't need an imam to say, yeah, go ahead, yeah, khalas, you're divorced. So she really needs to go, please tell her.
Yes. I want to tell
She
her.
needs to go and check with the imam because she could be actually right now living with him in adultery.
Yes. I have to tell her that.
Please.
You know,
Yeah.
because other friends, she did complete the divorce. She said, as long as he divorced me, she did not. But this one, she's still living with him. Yes. She said, he did not divorce me, Sharia.
That's
And
not.
for me, I have the question. I keep questioning that thing again.
No,
and
tell
again.
her, Habibti Mafi, there is no divorce Shari. She
Yes.
has a court divorce.
Yeah.
Okay, khalas, that's it.
She had a good court divorce. He gave her all the money that he was signed up for her before marriage, and now she said he just. I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. He needs to actually do another marriage contract,
Yes,
a new marriage contract,
Yeah. He
and a
has to
new
marry another-
meher. I'm serious.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it has to be also recorded again in the court system.
But my question is that didn't you just mention earlier that if a couple do divorce
Yeah.
and if they want to get back together,
Yeah.
then both of them, or I think they have to marry somebody else and come back?
No,
How
no,
does that
no,
work?
no. This is only if he had divorced her 3 times.
Okay, so in this case, she's saying that he didn't divorce her 3 times.
Oh, but the divorce is final, khalas. He didn't take her back before the divorce was final. You follow me? So
Yeah.
legally in the system, she is divorced. There has to be a new contract for them to be married again. Am I making sense to
I'm a
you?
little bit confused. I'm not sure how she went through the court system and she still thinks she's not divorced. Did he not say verbally that I'm divorcing you 3 times and he just
It's-
did the paperwork?
She believes because she didn't get an imam telling her you are
Oh.
taliq,
Okay,
okay?
I see.
That's why she believes that the divorce from the US court system is not valid, when actually it holds much more authority than the imam saying you are taliq.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because for him to even go through the paperwork, he has to have said to her 3 times that I divorce you.
And not only that, in order to become finally divorced, at least in California, I don't know about other states, you must have had actually finished 6 months. So, I mean, really, yani, it's even beyond the idda, yani.
Yeah.
So, yes.
But as a marriage, like Islamically, they're
Yeah.
not giving because they're getting money from the state, like divorce, for the taxes and purposes.
So-
Some people does that. But Islamically, he didn't give her like talaq 3 times. He's not saying to her. So they say that they are still marriage as Islamically, but divorce, like American way, they are divorced as a court.
And they're doing that because this is more financially...
Yeah, more financial, they get more money from the state.
Because
people
they're
are
two,
doing-
because they're
because
two
of the
separate
kids.
individuals?
Yes, individual taxes.
Okay.
With the kids.
Okay. I'm not going to have... I don't have a comment. I don't have a comment.
So when
yeah.
you're saying that when they get it, the paperwork from the court, that's it, it's divorce.
Yes, because it's legal, but
Legal.
you are talking about a case where you have the intention, and this now we go back to the intention.
Yeah.
The intention of them is not separation. You see, so it becomes muddy. It becomes really
Real.
ugly this
Right.
way. I don't have a say.
Okay, there's
Yeah.
a question there.
Iman, did you want to say something? Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
For anybody who's here thinking of divorce, or you know somebody who thinks of divorce, you cannot go through this life-altering decision. Having kids or not having kids, it's a big decision to go through naively. You cannot go naively through the You need to know your rights. You need to know the rules of the land. You need to know where you're going to be earning your risk. You need to know, you need to know what's going to come with it, emotionally, psychologically, physically, all of it. So I feel so sad for this woman that doesn't know her rights. She got a legal paperwork and she's waiting for the sheikh. You really need to know your rights. You need to be educated. You need to read. You need to ask the proper people before you go through that stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very important. Absolutely.
Excuse me. My question regarding the marriage, not divorce.
Okay.
The marriage in Islam, it means that Sheikh should write the contract, which is عقد النكاح, plus to witness, right?
Actually, there is nothing in Islam that says that the sheikh has to write the contract. We have actually created this because of all the problems that have happened in society. So we've legalized the
Okay.
writing of the contract to protect the rights of people.
Yeah, this is my question now.
Yeah,
Some people here in California,
Yeah.
they get married.
yeah,
They go to Sheikh, some Sheikhs here in California and Orange
Yeah.
County.
yeah.
They go to Sheikh with 2 witnesses and they write the contract and they get married.
Yes,
They don't go to file the marriage in the city.
I know.
I need your comments. What do you think about that? It's against the law. What's the risk also behind this? And also, some people, they are married already.
Yes,
They go to marry another one on.
just like the sister was
They go to
saying.
Sheikh
Yes.
and get married without filing. Because if he is going to file, it's against the law.
Yeah.
I
So-
need your comments, your advice, because many people is doing this. What is the risk behind it?
Okay.
Thank you.
So kind of like what Iman was talking about earlier in terms of education, okay, and in terms of really knowing one's rights, okay. Usually the woman is the one who's going to suffer with these kind of marriages. The husband, so sorry, husband usually is not going to be impacted. It's the woman who's going to be impacted, unfortunately. Because if the marriage is not recognized and it's not legal, let's assume she gets pregnant. Those children are going to be born out of wedlock in terms of the eyes of the state of California. If she wants to go after the husband to get, financial support, she may not be able to do it, unless she had cohabitated with him for 7 years now. I don't remember what the number. So my issue with these kind of marriages, the one you are talking about, and I have seen them, and I have dealt with, couples who come to my office because this has happened, is the woman's rights are not protected. And that's what worries me, okay? So like Iman's saying, education is power. We need to educate our lovely girls that this is not acceptable for their own sake, okay? And inshallah, I'm very grateful to say that A lot of the imams now are on the same page in terms of like, they will not actually do that. I know I agree with you, there are still imams who are doing it. But I would say most of the imams right now are not agreeing to do the contract unless they get the certificate from the state, the city license or what have you. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. We've come a long way as a community.
Sheikh Jamal Diwan.
Yes.
He refused, to marry people before finishing or completing the paper in the city.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But some imams, they are doing it.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Sorry about that, And they create problems in the society for this.
I agree with you 100%. I had a case that came to me of a young couple that got married the way you are saying like this, behind the family's back. So not his family nor her family knew, okay? And they consummated the marriage. And then, after a few months, he decided that he doesn't want to be with her anymore. And, it was just so sad. I had them in the office and I'm like, do you recognize what you're doing to her? I mean, she's no longer now, I'm going to be, very blunt, she's no longer a virgin. And nobody knew that she was married because your marriage was not public. How is she going to get married now? How is she going to explain the situation to in the second marriage? Just broke my heart. Exactly. Absolutely. I'm empowering the woman. Yes. It is. Yes. And I'm inviting the men to treat us with ma'roof. That's what Allah said to do. Treat us with ma'roof and taqwa. If the taqwa and ma'roof are in place, we are not going to have these problems.